This is part 2 of the surprise series. If you haven't seen the first, basically, David was suspecting his wife Jenna of cheating on him with his best friend Greg. Jenna and Greg were both moving very weird, so he decides to hire a hitman to kill Greg. To his surprise, Jenna and Greg were actually setting up a surprise birthday party for him. However, it was too late for David to stop the hitman, and the hitman shot Greg. David ends up passing out at his surprise party. And so we continue. David wakes up in the hospital and asks for Greg, but Jenna calms him down and tells him that Greg got shot. Jenna assures him that Greg survived and he's in the ICU. He immediately tries to leave to see Greg, but Jenna and another nurse calms him down because David still shows signs of a mild concussion. Later that night, seeing Jenna fast asleep, David sneaks out of bed and leaves to check on Greg. Now, why David's hospital gown cover him up all the way? "I want to see them cheeks." David asks Greg what happened, and Greg explains that on the way to the party, some random man pulled up and shot at him multiple times, and the next minute, he was in a ambulance. Then David lies to Greg, saying he fell because he was intoxicated at the party. David then excuses himself and heads back to his room. Right then, the nurse shows up and assures Jenna that David will be discharged the following morning. After the nurse leaves, Jenna wonders how David passed out since she didn't see him get drunk. He lies saying it was because he was dehydrated and had a bit of alcohol that day. She believes him and tells him to get some rest. The next morning, David gets discharged, and he and Jenna check on Greg. There, they watch the news and learn from an eyewitness how some random person came out of his minivan and fired shots at Greg. The nurse attending to Greg complains about the high crime rate recently, but rejoices about the huge treat she got when putting his catheter in. Slowly, Greg wakes up, and the nurse goes to get his pain medication after watching him wince in pain. He then catches up on what happened just before the incident. The couple advises him to get some rest, and they can get him some Raising Cane's. After they leave, a pasty man dressed as a doctor shows up in Greg's ward and tries to inject his drip with Ozempic, but a nurse sees him and stops him. He quickly runs off, and the nurse calls for security. David and Jenna rush back into the room after hearing the commotion. The nurse explains everything to them, and they start wondering who might be after Greg. He gets worked up, but the nurse decides to change his drip just in case. Moments later, 2 detectives show up and inform Greg that they're on his case and will catch the person. After exchanging pleasantries with David and Jenna, the detectives ask where they were the night Greg got shot. David tells them that he and Jenna were at a party, and that was when he got the call about the incident. Oop, he slipped up. The cops ask who called him, but before he can answer, the nurse returns with pain medication for Greg, and they have to pause the interrogation. Greg tries to hit up the phone nurse, but she's married. After she leaves, the cops tell the couple that it wouldn't be wise to return home since the killer might come after them. Jenna says they'll stay at her friend Lisa's place. After that, David and Jenna leave Greg and promise to come back the next day. David goes to the bathroom and calls Big Back James, telling him to call the whole plan off, that James's shitty investigation was wrong. But James reminds him not to contact him and tells David it's too late, and he'll have to face the consequences. They arrive at Lisa's, and David zones out almost the entire time Lisa and Jenna talk. After Lisa leaves, Jenna checks on David and starts suspecting he's hiding something from her based on his behavior. He yells at her for being too nosy, but immediately apologizes. Later that night, he has a nightmare about Greg's incident and wakes up panting. "Y'all, we need more shots of him shirtless, please." Days later, the detectives continue investigating Greg's case, trying to find a motive behind the attempted murder, but they're shit at their jobs. They decide to call Lisa in and interrogate her. She says David thought Greg was having an affair with Jenna. They then interrogate David and Jenna and realize David's side of the story isn't adding up. Jenna denies having an affair with Greg, but freezes when they ask if David ever suspected her. David, on the other hand, denies suspecting Greg of breaking his wife's back, but the detectives tell him the math ain't mathing and that Lisa told them everything. Later that evening, David goes to Lisa and confronts her for being a snitch. She tells him she was just doing what she was told, and she starts to think David is moving weird. The next day, the cops meet Greg and ask him if he was aware that David had accused Jenna of having an affair with him. They ask him if David was ever jealous enough to instigate a murder, and he stops them and refuses to believe their theories. David and Jenna later show up at Greg's ward to check up on him, and he tells them he'll soon start rehab. He tells them that his first mission after being discharged is to take the nurse out, and they immediately laugh at him. Jenna confirms the nurse is married, but Greg doesn't mind and says married women give the best sloppy joes. David gets irritated by the response and gets up to leave, lying to Greg that he and Jenna have an outing to attend. Surprised, Jenna gets up to leave, and she dresses Greg's bed, but David gets mad at her and yells at her to leave with him. When they get home, she challenges him about his weird behavior, but he ignores her and then yells at her for always nagging. "Girl, you best divorce this man." Still, she follows him to the reservation he claimed to have booked. When they get there, the waitress tells them that they only take reservations, so he shows the waitress the name John on the list and she takes them to their table. There, Jenna asks to confirm if he's all right and if anything is wrong with him, and he opens up about how he gets jealous of the way she interacts with Greg. Jenna informs him that nothing is going on between them and assures David that his eggplant is the only one she loves. Her words lifts his spirit and they enjoy their meal. Later that night, David and Jenna return to Lisa's place, but they are stalked by the hitman. Troubled by the nightmares, David goes downstairs to have a glass of water, but he sees Greg standing behind him and confronts him about putting a hit on him. David tries to explain himself, but Greg pulls out a gun and shoots him, and David wakes up screaming. It was a double dream. The next day, while David prepares to go to work, the hitman waits outside the house, looking ready to kill, but quickly drives away after seeing the popo. To David's surprise, the cops arrest him for Greg's attempted murder, and he's taken to the interrogation room, where the detectives accuse him of hiring a hitman to kill Greg. They intimidate him and tell him to fess up, and just as he's about to confess, his lawyer shows up and demands David's release. After David gets released, he goes to Greg's ward with the intent to confess to them, but they interrupt him, telling him they trust him. Lisa over here, playing the Tubi best friend, giving suspicious looks though. Turns out Greg was the one who hired David's lawyer. Suddenly, Lisa gets a notification and reads the news to them, informing them that a person named James Charles was arrested for Greg's attempted murder. James Charles? Sister snapped. While the others celebrate, David excuses himself to take a phone call from Big Back James. James tells him that the hitman will eat him, and he hopes David has straightened up any loose ends. After the call, David goes back inside looking gloomy, and then heads home with Jenna. But before Lisa leaves the room, she tells Greg that she likes the fact that he trusts people a lot, even though some of them don't deserve it. When David gets home, he talks to the mirror, blaming himself, and wonders how he's going to fix things. The next morning, Lisa gets an anonymous tip that David was responsible for getting Greg shot. Jenna suddenly shows up and pays Lisa for accommodating David and her. Lisa tells Jenna that the man they caught was killed in his jail cell. She tries to show Jenna her findings on David, but David shows up, and Lisa brushes off what she's about to say. Left alone, David asks Lisa what she told Jenna, and she tells him it's nothing important. He then interrogates her and gets real threatening, but Lisa brushes him off and runs upstairs. Later, David goes to check on Greg, who hands him 2 tickets to Hawaii, apologizing for not giving him a birthday gift on time. Feeling guilty, David reluctantly takes the tickets and thanks Greg, but he doesn't stay long with him and excuses himself to help Jenna pack her stuff. Meanwhile, the detectives curse their luck for losing their only lead. Still, they make up their minds to find more witnesses. Later, Lisa visits Greg and tries to tell him that David isn't who he thinks he is, but he isn't convinced. Moments later, the investigators show up and sadly inform Greg that the hitman who was caught was killed in his cell. Despite looking like all leads are lost, the men inform Greg that they have a lead on James, a private investigator connected to the hitman, and they tell him that he met with David a few days before the incident. Greg finds it hard to believe that his best friend would mean him harm, but Detective Johnson, the lead detective, tells him based on his work experience that it's those who are closest to people who mean them harm the most. Ain't that the truth? The men leave to continue their investigation. Later that night, as Jenna packs to go visit her family for the weekend, David walks in on her, and she feels bad that she can't be with him. He shows her the tickets to Hawaii Greg got them due to missing the first one, and she calls Greg a blessing. She then calls David a good friend, but he feels guilty. She kisses him and realizes that he's been drinking again, so he tells her it's because of Greg's case. But Jenna breaks the news to him that the suspect was found dead in his cell. Immediately, a huge wave of relief comes to David, but he then tries to act worried about how they'll catch the killer, and Jenna tells him that Lisa told her someone is willing to talk. Upon hearing that, David gets worried again. He then helps her with her bags downstairs, and she leaves for her trip. After Jenna leaves, David stares daggers at Lisa and goes to his room. He drinks some more and remembers what James told him about how there are things that can't be undone. Intoxicated, he gets mad at Lisa and puts all the blame on her, so he goes downstairs with his rum bottle. He confronts her directly, and she's scared, but she tells him to come clean to the cops. Realizing that she knows about him, he tries to bribe her to keep her mouth shut, but Lisa refuses because it's in her blood to yap. He then notices her staring at a folder, and he rushes to grab it. In the quest to get it from her, he pushes her and checks the contents of the folder. There, he sees that she has run tabs on him and knows that he has been embezzling money. David then looks back at her to ask her how she came across such information, but sees her lying in cold blood on the floor and the edge of the dining table stained with blood. He realizes she hit her head on the table when he pushed her. He starts panicking, but calms himself down when Jenna calls him to inform him that she'll soon get on the plane. After the call, he starts brainstorming and eventually drags Lisa's body away. Meanwhile, Greg gets a letter, and when he opens it, he sees photos of David with James and also with the hitman. He then gets a voice recording of David asking James to give him the contact of a hitman to kill Greg. With all the evidence at Greg's fingertips, he finally realizes he's dumb for believing his fake friend. And that's the end of the movie. Of course there's a third one. And if Tubi wanted, they'd probably do a fourth and a fifth. Should we cover the last part? Apparently it gets crazy.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe now and turn on the notification because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. And if you'd like to watch more foolishness, click here or here.